Hello everyone, so today I'm going to be doing a film review. I'm going to be reviewing this film here. It's called I Confess and it came out in 1953. So this was a first time watch for me. I'd never seen it before and I watched it the other night for the first time. And generally, I think I really enjoyed this film. So it's directed by Alfred Hitchcock. If you're someone who enjoys films and you like classic films, I think Alfred Hitchcock's probably one of those directors who doesn't really need any introduction, but is known as the master of suspense, and we do see quite a bit of it in this film. So this film stars Montgomery Clift. He plays a priest, and right at the start of this film we see a murder has taken place, although we don't actually see the murder. The camera pans over the dead body and it has some dramatic music playing, almost sets it up to be a murder mystery kind of film, but it's not like that because we find out soon who the murderer is. It's actually this caretaker, and he comes to the priest, he goes up to the priest rather, and played by Montgomery Clift, and he confesses the murder. He says, "I've murdered somebody, but you mustn't tell anybody." So immediately the burden is put on Montgomery Clift's character. A murder has taken place, but he mustn't tell anybody. So soon an investigation is carried out into this murder, and we have Carl Malden's character, who's an inspector, who's really in charge of overseeing this. What ends up happening is that Montgomery Clift's character goes to the house where the man was murdered, and he ends up causing himself to get in deeper and deeper trouble, and Carl Malden's character, the inspector, starts to become more suspicious of Clift and thinks that perhaps he might be the murderer, because Montgomery Clift is in a situation when he doesn't reveal too much. He's being asked questions by the inspector. There's a scene where the inspector is asking questions, and Montgomery Clift is constantly saying things like, "Oh, that's not relevant. Oh, I don't need to say that. That's got nothing to do with the murder." And increasingly, because he's hiding so much, it ends up looking like that he's the murderer, and he ends up getting into deeper and deeper trouble. So this film was really excellent in the way it portrays the difference between its characters, because I love Montgomery Clift's performance in this. Although he's often very quiet, he's a character who's very selfless. He's trying to do the right thing. He doesn't want to put a foot wrong, but at the same time, because of this, he's putting himself in deeper and deeper trouble. He's just digging himself a hole throughout this film, and we can see things get worse and worse throughout the story for him. And then we have the caretaker character, who is the murderer, and he is someone who at first, although we don't actually see the murder taking place, when he confesses, he does say, "It was an accident, I didn't mean to do it." And when I was watching it, I was sort of thinking, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. But this caretaker character, every time he appears, he says the same thing. He goes up to Montgomery Clift and he says, you haven't told anybody, have you? You mustn't tell anybody. Please don't tell anyone. You haven't told anyone." And he becomes an increasingly annoying character throughout this film. And he's a very selfish individual. He's only really looking out for himself, and he doesn't really care about anybody else. Now, we also have Anne Baxter in this film. She plays a love interest in Montgomery Clift's character, and there's a bit of a backstory between them, and she ends up becoming caught up in the mystery of the murder, and we get this excellent scene about halfway through the film where she is trying to clear Montgomery Clift's name. She's trying to say, no, Montgomery Clift couldn't have done this. And then she does this. There's this massive flashback sequence, which in my opinion does go on a bit too long, but the sequence essentially shows the backstory between Montgomery Clift and Anne Baxter. And it's a very well done scene because it establishes the characters, establishes the backstory, but it ends up being one of those scenes that when you're watching it, you think, oh, okay, yeah, things are making sense now, but then because of the timing, things don't quite work out and it becomes even worse, and Montgomery Clift's character gets in even deeper trouble. So it is really interesting seeing how the story pans out. And really this film, it deals with the theme of morality, I suppose, and honesty, sort of where do you draw the line, I suppose, and also the theme of justice as well. Although this film is perhaps categorised as a film noir, it is more of a courtroom drama as well, though there is only a small scene which is actually set in a courtroom. This is one of the more interesting, and one of the more pivotal scenes in the film. So it is worth saying that this film, it is fairly short. It's only 94 minutes long, and to be honest, I think that running time is just about right. I did really like the ending of the film. It went in a slightly different direction than I was expecting towards the end. I think it ended at just the right moment. There wasn't any need for any further scenes afterwards. I think things were rounded off perfectly. I think that the music by Dmitri Tiomkin is excellent as well. I particularly like when it's used at the start to set the tone, and then throughout the movie. The film is filmed in black and white, which I suppose is probably to be expected for this time, 1953 perhaps, and it's set in Quebec City, which is in Canada, so a lot of the characters in the films are talking with a French accent, and some perhaps not, but obviously it's a film. But I did really like that setting of it, perhaps a bit unusual, so not being set in an American city. I think this film definitely has a real Alfred Hitchcock feel to it. You can definitely tell, you can see hints of Hitchcock's direction throughout the film, particularly with the way the characters interact, with the way the characters are interacting, with the narrative, with the story structure. I don't think this is one of Hitchcock's best films. If I'm completely honest, I'm not sure how many Alfred Hitchcock films I've seen. Must be about 15 or maybe 16. It's probably one of my least favourite Alfred Hitchcock films, but I like all of Hitchcock's films I've seen. I haven't seen a single film by Hitchcock that I don't like, so that's not a bad thing, me saying that at all. If you like Alfred Hitchcock as a director, you should definitely watch this film. It is very good. It is brilliant. Perhaps in the middle it might drag out a little bit in terms of the pacing, but it is one of those films. It did have a few surprises. It wasn't entirely predictable, and I do see this film as more of a character-driven story with us as the audience putting ourselves in Montgomery Clift's place. In fact, on the cover, actually, I do like this. It actually says, if you knew what he knew, what would you do? So essentially, us as the audience, the best way to view this film was put yourself in the position of Montgomery Clift's character. Think about how you would approach this situation if you were in his shoes, and the moral dilemma which is involved with his character. Just a really interesting idea. I hope I haven't spoiled the story too much, but essentially that is the overall structure to the plot, and it just pans out really well in the end. I was generally very happy with it, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I'd recommend it. So I confess I'm going to give it a rating of 8 out of 10. And as I said, if you like Alfred Hitchcock, then I Confess is definitely worth checking out. So there we go. So that is my review of I Confess. So have you guys seen I Confess? What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with my opinion? Please let me know. If you haven't seen it, would you like to see it? Again, please feel free to post a comment down below. So as usual, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.